Thank you for joining us today for the Tennessee Farmers Market Vendor Boot Camp webinar series. Our topic today is merchandising methods to make money, and we're grateful to have you with us today. We appreciate my coworker Jared Bruhin from the Center for Profitable Agriculture joining us as today's instructor. We deeply appreciate the support that's been provided by USDA Rural Development and from Tennessee Department of Agriculture and the Tennessee Association of Farmers Markets to help make this webinar series possible. As some of you know, we planned a series of Farmers Market Vendor Bootcamp workshops to present the topics we're covering this week, and we had to cancel 3 of the 6 workshops because of the coronavirus. We're glad to have the technology available to present these topics as webinars. And to help report the impact of this webinar, I will ask you to complete a very brief online evaluation of the session at the end. And the link to the evaluation will be posted in the chat box for you at the end of today's webinar. A few housekeeping items. Please leave your microphones on mute and your video turned off during the session. That will help us minimize the distractions. And if you would now locate the chat box, please type your name and location into the chat box to help us record attendance. Please note that attendance at all 4 webinars this week, today, Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday, will fulfill a Tennessee Ag Enhancement Program requirement in the agritourism, fruit and vegetable, and value-added producer diversification sectors. So if you want your attendance to be documented for TAEP, please type in your name as it appears on TDA's list. And if you're joining us by phone, please let Erica Alexander at TDA know that you have attended these sessions by emailing her at erica.alexander@tn.gov. You can use the chat box at any time during the session to submit a question, and I will help Jared monitor the chat box for your questions or comments during the presentation. And near the end of the webinar, I'll type in the chat box a link to the evaluation form with just a few short questions. As I mentioned, we are recording the session today, and I plan to post it online in the event that you'd like to view it again or share it with someone else. We're excited to have Jared Bruhin with us today. Jared's one of our 2 marketing specialists, and he is very knowledgeable about the subject of merchandising. So if there are no questions at this time, let's dive into merchandising methods to make money.
Thank you very much, Hal. Good morning and good afternoon to everyone, depending on where you may be located here in the state. My name is Jared Bruhin. As Hal said, I'm with the Center for Profitable Agriculture, and I'm one of the 2 marketing specialists alongside Megan LaFew. Today, we're going to take about an hour or so, and we're going to talk about merchandising methods that'll help you make some money. Primarily, these photos and tips are useful for farmer market vendors. This can also be applied to thinking about marketing your farmer's market if you're a manager. It can also be used in terms of marketing at a roadside stand or on your farm retail. These are some really good considerations for you to think about in all of these direct marketing avenues. If I can get my screen to, there we go. So what if I told you that focusing on 3 simple methods could increase your sales and decrease your costs, right? Without seeing everyone, I imagine everyone's kind of shaking their heads thinking, okay, I could get on board with that. That'd be pretty good. So with that in mind, we're going to kind of move through these slides in today, and we're going to talk about different methods that are going to help you make money. We're going to talk about why you want to do these methods and how you can specifically implement them into your marketing techniques, marketing practices, so that you ultimately can drive additional sales and make some more money in doing so. So the first thing is you really want to make a good first impression. And when I say make a good first impression, I'm saying that customers will decide within 3 to 6 seconds whether or not to approach you or avoid you. I like to give the example of if you're driving down the road in your hometown and you see a yard sale sign and you look over, and it's pretty quick that you're going to decide whether you want to stop at that yard sale or not, right? So You'll know if there's things that you want to see, or if it just looks kind of junky and stuff that you would not be interested in at all. You're not going to even bother stopping. So you want to think about that in terms of how your customers would view you and your market stand, and how they would approach you as well. So first off, I like to, especially when we're all gathered together, which we're not able to do today, I like to kind of ask and get some opinions on which one makes a better first impression. If you want to just real quickly, just type A or B in the chat box. I'm curious to get a little feedback. Make this a little interactive if we can. Okay, I'm seeing a lot of B's so far. Okay, great. So very good. Yes, I would agree that B does make a better first impression. We'll talk more about each of these photos a little later, and give some reasons about why. But very good. Most of you are on board. You identify the better first impression, so that's a good sign. We'll do this again. Better one, better A or B. I feel like an ophthalmologist asking better one, better two, better A, better B. Okay, I'm seeing a lot of B's as well. Very good. So we're all kind of looking for the same things, and as marketers, we need to know that our consumers are going to be thinking the same way that we are. So using these two photos here, just as a brief example, A, you can see the lady sitting down. She's not necessarily engaged with the audience, with any customers maybe passing by. She has her van door open, so you can see some trash and boxes inside the back of her van that don't necessarily look great or very eye appealing. She's got produce on the floor, which is an absolute no-no, and we'll talk about that more later. And the person on the right, she's got nice labels for all of her produce or all of her baked goods. They're all in nice woven baskets, and she has a nice tablecloth. And she's standing up talking to her customers. So in general, it looks like she's got a better first impression. See, Carlos says it looks like A, she came straight from an auction. And yeah, that may be the case. So it doesn't necessarily look like she grew that produce on her own. So definitely something to take in mind. You want to think about a good first impression and the best way to do that. So one way to do that is to prepare yourself, and this is talking about your person, your physical person specifically. You want to make sure that you dress the part, right? So maybe you have a farm logo or a farm name, and you have some nice clothing that's clean and solid colors that has that farm logo printed on it or sewn in on it, so that you can wear that. Maybe you have a name tag that has your name. It's a good idea to have a name tag, whether it's a professionally done one or simply even you have a sticker that just has your name on it. It's good for customers to be able to walk up to a stand and not just have to try to have a conversation with you without knowing your name, or maybe they're too embarrassed to ask for your name, or they don't want to, but they would like to say your name. So being able to wear a name tag provides them an opportunity to know your name and feel kind of connected with you from the bat, right off the bat. You want to choose to have a positive attitude. I give the kind of morbid example of that morning you may have just left the vet where you had to put your puppy down, or you had to put your dog down. I mean, there's a lot of hard things that can go on in our lives, and a lot of things we're experiencing right now. You do not want to take any of that negativity to the market when you go. You want to be a positive influence, a positive example in the market. You want to make sure that you have an upbeat attitude, that you're friendly and engaging, that you're willing to talk to people. You don't want anybody to think or know or see you and think, man, something really bad happened to them today. I don't know if I want to kind of wrap myself in that, or maybe they don't probably want to talk to me or fool with me or anything. So make sure that you have a good positive attitude when you go to the market. And lastly, you want to be able to stand up and stay busy. If somebody sees you, you're just kind of sitting slouched behind your table, and if you're sitting behind your table and you don't really look attentive or active, then somebody's just going to kind of walk past you, and they're just going to forget about you and not really notice you at all. So definitely want to stand up and stay busy. I know that whenever we did these workshops in the past, I had a few people ask me, well, how do you expect us to stand up all day long? And I said, well, no, certainly markets are very long. They can be very hot in the outdoor weather. So certainly I'm not asking you or telling you to stand up and be standing all day. But I would encourage you, if you can get a tall stool, something that is pretty high level, so that whenever you sit down on it, you're still more or less eye level with customers. It keeps you up from behind your table and behind your produce, so people can still see you, you're elevated, and you can still have an engaged conversation with them. You want to prepare yourself in thinking about your stand. If you can face upstream, so when you think about a market, say it's in a horseshoe pattern or a U-shaped pattern, and the typical flow comes in, there's one kind of main entrance, and everyone sort of flows through and then exits from the exits out the different exit. You can tell the stream of people and the flow of people and how that goes. So you want to make sure that you yourself are kind of positioned towards the upstream, the way that people are coming, so that whenever they see you from further away, they're going to be more engaged with you and more connected with you because they can see you more easily. You want to make sure that you smile. You want to be, again, engaging with people. You want to have a nice, positive attitude. Making eye contact is a great way to interact with people. When you make eye contact, it kind of gets past that first level of communication. Right. So after you make eye contact, then you can think to engage them, and you want to engage anybody within 8 feet of you. So you want to make sure that you talk to them and engage them, ask them how they're doing, if there's anything special that they're looking for, ask them if they've been coming to the market frequently, if you don't recognize them, anything that you can do just to engage them and talk with them, more likely to draw them over to your booth and ultimately to spend time with you and ultimately hopefully make a sale or two. So you want to prepare your Presto area, right? So if you can display and I'll talk about display later, but if you can kind of arrange your produce or peppers here in this example in a way that is eye appealing and kind of catches the attention of people as they pass by, you're going to generate a lot of interest, and you're going to get a lot of people that are going to want to come by and talk to you. Just, wow, these peppers are so amazing. They're so beautiful, the way the colors you have them laid out. You're going to trigger some desires in them to want to be drawn in and want to see them. And ultimately, you're going to motivate action. And when we talk about action in a farmer's market, the action that we're going for is ultimately making a sale and selling products. So that is a good thing. That is motivating action is what we want to see. Some other things to think about in terms of your area is, and this is, I like to talk a lot about your story. So how are you different? When you think about markets, you may have 5 different vendors at the market, all selling the exact same produce, laid out in a little bit different ways, but ultimately they're selling very similar products. How are you individually different from others in the market, your other competitors? What makes you special? So is there a story you have to tell? Maybe you're growing this produce on a century farm, or maybe you're a 6th or 7th or 8th generation farmer working on the same land that is able to provide this produce to people. What are ways that make you special, that stand out from someone else? Maybe you're growing with specific techniques that you can back up with documentation, whether it's organic or however. Maybe you should make sure that you can verify how you're doing that, but those are ways to kind of set you apart, make you different, and make you special. I'll pause right here. If anyone has any questions of just whatever I've gone over, I've been moved kind of quickly, but please feel free to, at any point, drop a question in the chat box. I'm keeping my eye on it, so I'll see any questions that come through. Again, please feel free to post any questions you may have. Okay, so number 2 is talking about how to design an effective product display. So when we're thinking about product displays and we're thinking about retail is detail. So if you can preserve your product quality, you want to be able to do so. And what I'm saying there is you want to, if you have coolers that you need to keep your produce cool, that you're not necessarily displaying in the hottest summer days of the market, you want to make sure that you have coolers that can keep your product chilled and preserve the quality of that product. Because ultimately you're trying to sell the highest quality product that you can, so that your customers will come to identify you with high quality product, and they'll want to come back and buy from you again. You want to be able to showcase your products in a way that will entice people again to come in and see your products, and you want to encourage them to ultimately make purchases. Again, that kind of driving them to action. So you want to appeal to the customer's senses. We're very sensual beings, humans are, and shopping and buying are no different. So they're very sensory activities. So when you think of the five senses, your sight, your taste, your touch, smell, and hearing, you want to think of ways as a marketer, as a vendor, how can you display your products to appeal to these five senses? All humans are a little different. When you think about individuals, some people may be more sight oriented, others may be more taste oriented or smell, some may be hearing. So you need to, as a marketer, find ways to reach out to people in all five of these ways if you can, because you may be trying to talk to somebody and engage them in a verbal conversation, thinking that they may be drawn toward hearing, but in reality, they're focused on touch, but you don't necessarily give them the opportunity to touch and handle your product. They may not be as inclined to make a purchase from you. So you need to find a way to engage all five of the senses if possible. Table height and depth is another thing that's important. You want to make sure that you provide your customers convenient, easy access to the product. You want to make sure that they have a clear view of your product. Like I mentioned before, you do not want to have anything displayed on the ground. You want to make sure that everything is elevated on a table or something. Kind of in general, you can, if you think of just kind of the average size person, you want the table to be about belt height, about waist height, and you don't want any high shelves to go above about 6 inches over the average person's head. So it works better when we're in person. I can kind of use some examples or use myself as an example but it's again about waist height to just a few inches over your head, so that you're not forcing someone to stretch or reach too far to try and reach the product overhead, or you're not making someone bend over if they may have back issues or they just really don't feel comfortable bending over to try and reach up to reach the product. You want to make sure that it's convenient for them, because the more convenient the experience is for a customer, the more likely they're going to either purchase something or come back, or purchase something and then come back due to the convenience of that. Also note that your tables and shelves should ideally not be deeper than 2 feet, and by that I mean kind of 2 feet deep. So somebody's not having to bend over and reach across the whole table. They may knock over produce or knock over signs. If there are signs that are close to the front, they may bump them with their sleeve or something like that. So if you have the ability to keep kind of narrow, no deeper than 2 feet tables, then that would work best. And it is difficult with that. You would need more tables, or you'd have to spread out more to get all of your product on that table. But it's another thing to consider when you talk about convenience. It would be ideal to have less than 2 feet, but it's not necessarily always practical. So the foundation of your display needs to obviously be clean and visually appealing. We're going to talk about primary colors, secondaries, and then looking at complementary colors. I've got a few pictures of examples to go through. So your table covering should accentuate the product that you're trying to sell, not necessarily dominate the display. It's always good to use solid colors that complement the products, especially if you're selling solid colored produce. You want to have a nice solid color display that'll really make that pop. And what I mean by making it pop is this gentleman's selling these nice juicy red tomatoes, and they look great and they're fresh and homegrown. But he's got one, he doesn't have a tablecloth. He has a dark color tablecloth in the front, but he has a red tablecloth on the side, and it kind of makes those tomatoes not really pop out. They kind of blend into the tablecloth, and they kind of lose some of their color. They kind of get lost in the tablecloth. So we would want to accentuate those tomatoes with a different color tablecloth. This is an example of some okra and other lighter colored or green vegetables, all displayed on a nice red tablecloth. It's been ironed, it's been pressed, it looks neat. It's clean, and it really makes those lighter colored or green vegetables pop and stand out. So that's a wonderful example of using a nice tablecloth that really kind of makes something stand out. I had someone ask me previously, is it better if you have multiple tables to have all the same color tablecloth, or is it okay to kind of mix it up and mix and match? And here's a good example of that. So you can see on the kind of back or the right side of the picture towards the back table, they've got tomatoes and some another vegetable or produce that are on a white tablecloth, and they stand out pretty well from a white tablecloth, and that's okay. And it's okay to have different tablecloths if you're trying to market different products. It's okay to display them a little differently. If you have kind of it would be nice if they were all kind of the same, so that somebody, if they see them passing by, they'll understand, okay, these three tables all belong to this farmer because they all have identical matching tablecloths, and they just kind of go together, right? So you create some uniformity amongst your display, and that would be ideal if you can do so, but it's not necessarily a deal breaker if you're not able to use the exact same tablecloth. Another consideration could be, and we'll talk about signage later, but if you have just your farm name embroidered or list in the tablecloth that somebody can see, if it's not too crowded, they can see a nice print of your farm logo or something in the tablecloth, that really shows that you care a lot about your display and that you put a lot of time and effort into your display to make that possible. So that really kind of helps you stand out as a marketer. Slope shelves are a great resource if you're looking to elevate your product and make your display longer. You can have a much deeper display with an elevated shelf, because some of the issues that I talked about reaching over and maybe knocking stuff over, some of that kind of goes away with an elevated shelf. However, you want to make sure that your slopes on your shelves are not too steep. Industry standard is about 15 degrees slope on that. If you have lighter weight produce, smaller things, you could increase that slope to 25 or 30 degrees. Ideally, if you have produce here, kind of looking at this picture, for example, I see the little baby potatoes, or maybe the small tomatoes. They look like they could easily roll off, or even the cucumbers may be rolling off very easily. So you want to make sure that you have some sort of board in the front of your display to prevent any produce from falling off and hitting the floor. That would not be ideal, because you certainly wouldn't, if it gets damaged, you wouldn't want to try to resell it. So there's a few extra kind of things to think about if you're going to develop a slope shelving, but that would be one thing to think about. When you think about the containers that you're using and the packaging that you're selling products in, you want to make sure that it's clean. You don't want to have any stains or dirt on your containers. You don't necessarily want to try to sell produce in the containers that you picked it in the field that morning. You may think that it makes you feel sort of authentic. Say, I just picked these tomatoes from the field just this morning, and you're getting them untouched straight from the field in the exact same containers. Well, people may not want to buy dirty produce in the first place, and they certainly don't want to buy them in a dirty container. So if you have separate containers for when you're harvesting as opposed to when you're selling, that would be ideal. Again, you want to make sure they're clean and there's no dirt. Make sure they're visually appealing. These nice little kind of green baskets, make sure that people can see down into the product so they know what the product they're getting, and they can kind of assure that the quality is there throughout, not necessarily just on top. You certainly want to avoid any containers that are inconsistent with your operation. You don't want to sell used containers that have farm names other than your farm, and you certainly don't want to use a container that says California produce. Now, that may just be a container that you're using as a transport, because it's a nice cardboard box that is sturdy, and you use it just simply to transport your product from the vehicle to the table. If that's the case, and I'll mention this later, you want to make sure you get that out of sight, out of mind from the consumer. Otherwise, they're going to assume without knowing any different, that you are purchasing California produce and then marketing it as locally grown, and that would not be would not be a good situation. So certainly don't want to mix messages with other operations, unless that is what you're planning to do. You're selling other local farmers' produce, then it would be acceptable to market them as such, but do not make claims that you are locally growing if you're in fact selling other farms' produce. You want to make sure that your prices are displayed very clearly on each of your products. I'll use the picture on the left, this peaceful pastures. So this is kind of the typical sign I would see at a market if somebody was selling meat, different cuts of meat. This is typically how I see the signs. And although it's a good sign and it's colorful and it can be changed easily because it's a blackboard, I do have some problems with this sign and the way it's listed. To me, it makes it kind of feel very cluttered. It makes it difficult, especially for me. If I look at this, I have a hard time of finding specifically what I'm looking for, and I don't necessarily want to spend 2 minutes kind of standing there silently trying to scroll through everything on the list and then trying to figure out what the price is and then compare it to something else that I might be interested in and then trying to make a decision. And I don't necessarily want to take that time. So a good suggestion that I have in talking with some other people at some of these other workshops is if you list out your product your products by species. So maybe you have all your beef listed together, any pork you have listed together, any chicken you have listed together. List them in terms of that. And another thing I would suggest would be listing them in terms of the most expensive listed item first. So go sort them by price in a descending order. So start with your highest price item and then go down. Because if I'm showing up looking for, I really want to buy ribeye steaks, and that's all I care about, I don't want to have to sit there and go through ground beef, pork sausage, bratwurst, Polish sausage, chicken, summer sausage, bacon. I don't want to have to go through all of that if I'm really a customer that's wanting to spend a high premium for a good premium cut of ribeye. I want to be able to find that quickly. On the flip side, if I'm somebody that doesn't care about buying the higher priced beef cuts and I'm just there wanting to look for ground beef, if I see the prices are listed in a descending order, then it's very obvious to me that I should find ground beef near the bottom. So my eye would be quickly drawn to the bottom of that list to find the ground beef or maybe some stew meat or something like that. So just some things to think about if you're going to display all of your prices on a sign, especially for meat products that are going to be kept in a cooler or a refrigerator or a freezer that aren't going to be on display. If your products are on display, you certainly want to have the sign with your prices per pound or per unit, whether it's per individual vegetable or produce or per basket. Make sure it's clearly listed. Include the name of the product, and it's nice to have a picture of the product so people know what they're looking for. They can identify that pretty easily. So this is a good example on the right here of a good sign with price per pound and the name of the product. I talked about arranging your products in a way that are eye appealing, that are going to draw people's attention. So this is a great example of 3 examples of ways to artfully display your product. First picture, there's some nice apples in alternating colors. It looks very eye appealing. In the middle, if you're approaching a kind of a fall market, include some sunflowers or something. These things don't necessarily have to be for sale. It could just be some kind of artful art displays that you have on hand that you like to invest in, that you want to include in your stand, just to kind of draw attention to you and maybe from somebody else. Here's a great example of somebody selling cut flowers, fresh cut tulips. Although the flowers and the displays look great, how they're kind of standing, you see some of the pre bundled displays on the right of the picture, but it's kind of hard to see into those, and you don't really know if you're standing eye level. You can't really tell what is deep, what's the depth or the colors within. So this gentleman has taken a great approach to displaying some forward-facing bundles on top, and you can see deep into the arrangement, and you can see all the colors that are available, and really get an idea for what they're going to look like from a top-down approach. So it's just a great way to display some product if you have a way of elevating it that catches the eye and really gives the consumer a better picture of what they're trying to buy. The old adage is it's always true, and I've heard it numerous times, is to pile them high and you'll watch them fly. And so kind of what the reasoning behind this is that at the beginning of the market, you want to pile your products high, and you want to make sure that again, they look neat, but there's a lot of it. You want to show abundance. You want to make sure that your consumers feel like they're getting the best pick of product from your display. And as the day goes on, hopefully you'll be selling through a lot of product, and your supply will look to kind of dwindle. It'll look smaller. One thing you'll want to do is, if you're able to condense this product into smaller containers that are smaller displays, that'll be a good thing. One, it'll keep you busy. It'll make you look like you're active at your stand. But it'll also keep your product piled high, and it'll make sure that people that come later in the market still believe they're getting the best pick, even though maybe the best pick has already been selected through. They necessarily won't believe that. I mentioned it before that quality is king, and this gentleman here in this picture is doing a great job of making sure that the quality of his product is staying top notch with keeping his products cool. If you have coolers, like I mentioned before, you can store your product in to maintain the temperature. You can use ice if it's needed to keep the temperature down on your product. If you're in a very sunny market, or in an open market entirely and you don't have any shade, highly recommend some sort of pop-up tent. If you are going to go the route of a pop-up tent like the one shown, I would encourage you to use a white, cream, or tan, a very light colored tent. You want something to create shade and provide some shade and coolness for your products, but you don't want to use a black tent or something that's going to end up creating heat ultimately in it, or something that's going to make too dark of a shadow where consumers are not able to kind of get a real grasp for what the colors are in your products. You want to make sure that you're using a light colored tent. Something else to consider is if you're using a red tent or an orange tent or yellow tent, you're going to have a tent, you're going to have a color kind of hue added to your products that may throw off the accurate color of your product. So you don't necessarily want to go that route either. And you want to make sure that you're culling your products that have diminished quality. Ultimately, you don't want to be selling a poor quality product, because you will be known for that, just probably more so than you would be known for good quality products. So take that into mind and be willing to throw out a poor quality or diminished quality product as the day goes on, just to ensure that you're still providing your customers with a good quality product. You want to think of yourself as Mr. or Mrs. Clean. You want to make sure that you're providing clean products that are free of dust and dirt. Certainly don't want to have any pests or anything abundant in your produce. You want to get rid of any damaged produce, like I mentioned. If you have a clean display and you clean display equipment, whether it be the tables, the glass, any shelves, you want to make sure there's no dust. You keep them well cleaned and dusted. And also you want to keep any clutter and trash out of the view of the customer. I'll show the picture again of the lady sitting in the back of her van, but it's very clearly noted that she has all of her transport boxes just thrown in the back of her van, and it's right in the view of the consumer, and it doesn't necessarily look great. It's not appealing. You all were able to identify that from the beginning. So that's something else to keep in mind. This may be aisle and aisle width, maybe something more so for a manager. But if you have issues based on these kind of recommendations on the aisle width of your market, I would encourage you to talk to your manager and see if you can work out something and see if you can come to a better arrangement. But ideally, aisles should be at least 5 feet wide to allow for two-way traffic, right? You don't want somebody to look to, if there's multiple aisles in a market, you don't want somebody to come to an aisle and that's the aisle you're on, but it's already really crowded, or there's a lot of crowd around a different table, not necessarily yours. And somebody may decide that they don't want to go down that aisle because it looks crowded and it's going to be congested, and they certainly don't want to be around a bunch of people, as we all can well relate to, certainly nowadays. So if an aisle is wide enough, then there shouldn't be too many congestion issues, and 5 feet or more would be great. You also want the aisles to be able to accommodate wheelchairs and strollers. Certainly want to be ADA compliant, and make sure that anyone has the ability to access your stand, if at all possible, because if you start limiting the number or the ability for people to come find you in your market, you're reducing the total number of people that could potentially buy from you, and ultimately reducing your total potential sales. So things to consider as well. So let's critique a few. We'll look at some of these pictures that we looked at previously, and normally I like to throw in some engagement from the audience when we go through these pictures. So if you want to kind of point out a few things, I know I mentioned a few, but I'd love to just have a few people kind of type in chat just to keep a little bit of engagement going. Let me know a few things that you see that this person could improve on, or maybe something you like the way they're doing, or something along those lines. Yeah, so again, we see a lot of clutter. We've got product on the ground. We want to get that elevated. So there's storing products on top of other products is certainly no good. You may want to be able to store products away that could help. We've got mismatched containers. We've got different labels for the containers. Maybe not her farm name, so we need to do something with that. But yeah, no tablecloth. So those are some good things as well. Prices are hard to see, if not listed at all, on everything. So yeah, very good. So certainly could have her be up and being more engaged, and that would be great. So the next one, let's critique a few. I know we agreed that this was a better, this was a B, this was a better first visual appeal, but see if there's anything that could be critiqued on this picture. Yep, so all the baskets are the same color, so it kind of, and they're the same color as the product, so you kind of lose the look of the product in the baskets. So if you could have different colored baskets from the product, the product, in this case baked goods, would stand out a little better. No sloping display. It'd be great if she had something that she could maybe elevate the back of the baskets up a little bit to let people see into them. That would be great. She's not using solid color tablecloths. I would argue that probably is okay in her case. She's not trying to sell a real variety of colors, so nothing really gets lost per se in the tablecloth. However, one thing I would mention is that the placard, or the little the signs that she has with each individual product listing the price and the name, are the same color as the tablecloth, the red and white. So they maybe get lost in being able to see that. So if she could find a way to make those stand out a little better, I think that would be great. She does have bags in the back of her pocket, and so she's maybe could store those somewhere out of sight. But overall, I think this is a pretty good example. There are a few critiques that we can have, but she's doing a very good job, and this is actually somebody we work pretty closely with. So, yes, thank you for those. So here's another one. I like to mention on this one, it's really nice to have its elevated products that are kind of sloped, and you can see different stages and tiers. I like the nice burlap tablecloth. I would encourage if they could find a way to iron that or press that out and get some of the wrinkles out. That would look better. One thing I like to mention is the Falcon Ridge Farm sign that they have, where they're advertising blueberries and vine-ripened tomatoes. It's a really nice sign, and it's great to have a sign if you can have one that sticks out into the aisleway, so people can see your farm name from further away. They may be able to recognize you better. I do encourage, though, if you do use a sign of something of this nature, if you're allowed to, that you want to make sure that the sign is high enough that an averagely tall person would not hit their head on the bottom of that sign. That probably does not create the best first impression, hitting your head on someone's sign. So that's something to think about as well. If you're not able to elevate it above kind of the fray of people walking, then you may want to try and find a different way to display that. Here, this gentleman, this again is one that we identified as less appealing from the start. He's not very engaged. He's not very active with his customers. He's counting his money. Wouldn't we all like to? But maybe not at this moment. Maybe not right in the middle of in the market. I blurred out his face just for privacy concerns. But if it was not blurred out, he's chewing on a cigar. Maybe not necessarily the ideal location for that either. Probably don't need to be using tobacco products or something like that during the market. If he has a bag or something he can store his money in, that's a great suggestion. He does have product piled up pretty well on the right, but maybe it looks kind of cluttered. So if we can find a way to display that better. He's got prices listed on everything, but it's kind of handwritten and maybe can be confusing with what the product is going to. It's more of just the price and not necessarily anything listed about what's the product name. So somebody may be confused. He has an EBT sign on the tape to the back of his van to encourage people to be able to use EBT or SNAP dollars for his produce. However, they may not know that simply as you couldn't. They may not be able to read that because he's standing in front of it, or it's just a very small sign. So if he has a way to bring that to the front, then that would be better. And certainly the table is a little shorter, then that would be ideal. So those are some good suggestions as well. Here's another one that we identified as a good display, a kind of more eye-appealing display. He's got nice baskets. He's got things elevated. He's got signage that displays what the price and the product is. He has a nice farm name listed on his pop-up tent, which would be a very good suggestion to do. I see Melissa is asking the best and safest way to keep money while handling sales. Are you, Melissa, referring to kind of in the current environment with the coronavirus, COVID-19 taking place, the best ways to handle that money, or just best kind of safest ways to handle money in general? Just keeping it safe. Certainly if you have some sort of a lock box or something that you could keep under your table or just kind of out of sight, that you could, a cash box exactly, that you could operate out of. You could keep a small amount of money on you and then just work from the cash box. If there's no customers around, you can put some money away or pull out some additional change to work from as well. But certainly it's something to keep locked away. Maybe if you have multiple people with you at your table, if you keep it away in a vehicle that would be locked up, then that could be a good way to keep it secure as well. So back to this image. One thing I would note maybe is a negative on this is he's wearing the same color shirt as his tablecloth, and he almost looks like he kind of gets lost in his display. Again, you want to be thinking about every possible way of being noticed. So he may not have thought that the shirt he put on that morning was going to match the tablecloth. Maybe he did, but that's something that should be considered, and he necessarily doesn't stand out, even if he is standing up behind his product. What are your thoughts on leaving an empty checkout area on your table, space for people to sit their product, selections, purses, etc. I think that's a great suggestion. Mark, I would encourage, if you don't have the room or the availability of space to do that, then certainly I would encourage you just to go ahead and have your products using the entirety of your space. Maybe as the market goes on, if you start to dwindle on some of your produce and you start reducing your sizes of your containers, to kind of keep the piling high adage, then certainly it would make sense to have some area available for people to leave some produce, and maybe they can mark them off for their own, so that they can continue looking. And I think that's a great idea if you have the availability to do so. Certainly, girls sell better than grumpy farmers. I would say that's probably true. Again, and that goes back to having a good positive attitude. You don't necessarily have to be a grumpy farmer. You may look kind of grumpy, but you may have a bubbly, positive attitude, and if that's what they ultimately find out, then that's even better. So certainly to think about, certainly something to consider, especially every day when you enter the market. Crystal's asking if the slides will be available after the presentation. The slides are or will be available online, as well as the recording of this PowerPoint will be available on YouTube on our YouTube channel. What are some suggestions for displaying retail cuts of beef which have to be in a freezer, Donna? So Donna, with that, I would encourage you maybe go for pictures. If you have good pictures that and Manny and Triple G Farm kind of looks like they beat me to the punch there, but a good quality picture of what the retail cut looks like. Maybe it's you don't necessarily have to find a picture of just the general cut online. Maybe you open up some of your own product. Say you're going to cook it at home, or you're going to provide it to the family. Go ahead and cook it up and let it thaw out, and get a nice good image of your product, of what you're offering to sell. If somebody realizes that it is a picture of your product, then it may look better. They may believe it more than if they're just looking at a picture from the internet. Let's see. Kids sell better than grown-ups. Sure. And it's a great thing to have your kids involved. Certainly there's a lot of life lessons, not only to be learned on the farm, but to be learned at the market. And I think Hal will talk a little bit more about that and his personal experiences from growing up in Alabama selling peaches at markets. So certainly tune in a couple days for one of his presentations. He'll be talking about that as well. Mark in the Powell family is asking, can we serve cooked samples of our meat, and can we cook on site? That depends on your local health department. You'll have to go through them to make sure on what the health department says is okay to be cooked on site or to be serving cooked samples, and you'll want to follow their guidelines. Let's see. Angel is asking, are any recommendations for a quality scale to use at the market? I don't necessarily have any brands off the top of my head for a quality scale. Certainly want to make sure that it's accurate and can be verified to be accurate. That's something to consider. If some other people have maybe a suggestion for Angel that of good scales that they use at an affordable price, maybe they would like to share that with her as well. Marjorie's asking about sanitary procedures for exchange of money during COVID-19. Marjorie, that is an excellent question. We've heard numerous different suggestions provided by different people that are operating markets. One thing is if you are able to have enough money to have a kind of money in and money out container, you have people show you the money. If they're paying in cash, they put the money directly into a container that you do not touch. If they have to have change, first off, you would encourage them to have specific change and have exact amount of money that they have to pay. If they do have to have change and you have to be able to provide them change, I would encourage having a separate container of money that you can pull money out of, ones or fives or something small, that you pay them from that, so that you're not giving each customer money from a previous customer that you're and at the end of the market, you can take all the money from the paid into box, the dirty box, as you will. Take that home. You can Lysol the money or just leave it sitting for several days based on the CDC guidelines for how long the virus can live on certain surfaces. So you can follow those guidances and just leave that money sitting for a few days if possible, and then sanitize it and take it and deposit it. Let's see. Yeah, sampling can be tricky, and it is on a county by county basis. You need to work with your health department, and we can try to provide you some additional information there. So Melissa says that when they're selling sweet corn, they have a table set up, and she stands there to take orders and money while her son bags the corn. People line up alongside the truck to give him orders. What is the best way to tell those people to line up at the table? So that is tough. You want to, if there's a way to possibly have some signage or something that says line here to drive them to where you would be taking orders and money, so that they're not necessarily engaging with him. That can be tricky. Again, I think a sign would go a long way, or maybe just encouraging people or have him encourage people to come to you and find your line if there is a line, and not necessarily, and that he can't just take orders directly, but they have to go through you. Would be the best way to go through that. We put our product on little hand wagons and let kids pull it through the market. No need to be submitted on one spot. Yeah, that's great. That's a way, if your market allows you to travel and be mobile in the market, then that's certainly a way to get some of your product out there, and gives a chance for the kids to get out and people to see their faces and be encouraged by that. So that's a great way to market your products as well. So we've got a few scale suggestions. Use Taylor Classic Stainless. And then Hal has said you can get scales that you plan to get certified and permitted by TDA. They should have the NTEP label on them. So you certainly want to use a certified permitted scale by TDA. And there's you can go through TDA's weights and measures department to get information on that as well. We can provide that as well. Okay, great. I think we are caught up, and we'll keep going. So next we're going to talk about signage, signage that sells. So we're going to be talking about the individual displays. So you want to, your customers need and deserve clear communication from you. You need to be transparent in a lot of ways. You'll save a lot of time in doing this, and you'll build a lot of good relationships, and you'll meet a lot of customer expectations. If you're clear and clear in your communication, that could encourage purchases because somebody feels that you're trustworthy and they want to buy from you, and ultimately develop relationships for the long term. When you're thinking about your signage, color does matter. This is a list of 1 to 10 in kind of ideal color selection. So the number 1 one would be black on yellow. You're really looking here for high contrast with your colors. So you want either a very light background with a very dark lettering and font, or you look towards 3 and 4 and you'll see a very dark background with a very light lettering. So that's really the ultimate what you're going for is you want a high contrast or good contrasting colors to set up on your signs. You want to choose a font that is easy to read. Thin fonts may make it difficult for the text to be seen from a distance. Script fonts make it difficult to read at all if someone's not very good at reading script. All caps, you can lose a lot of letters and get kind of confused in trying to read all caps. So you want to just either uppercase the first letter and then lowercase the remaining. It's easier for the brain to process. And if you crowd your letters too closely just because you believe you don't have enough space on your sign, then you're going to run into the issue of kerning, where your letters are too close together and your words ultimately run together, and it's kind of hard to tell what is being read. Thinking about the size of your font, think pretty much in general of 1 inch of letter height per 10 feet of legibility distance, and that's kind of on the maximum, or a pretty good rule of thumb to go by. And a 72-inch font typically prints to 1 inch in height. So the 72 on your printer would come out about 1. So think in terms of that to expand that as well. So there's just a few examples of readable distance, maximum impact. So 30 feet, you're looking for probably a 3-inch letter height, and the maximum readable distance would probably be about 100 feet, and then so forth. So think about the size of your letters when you're making your signs. Make sure that your farm name and the most pertinent information is the largest and most visible. And then you can follow it up with additional lesser important information, maybe a phone number or a website address or an email contact. Some of those things could be a little bit smaller. You can drop the $sign. It's pretty, for most people when they're entering a farmer's market in the United States, it's pretty obvious they're going to be paying in dollars, maybe not pounds or euros or anything else. So you can drop the $sign to save a little clutter, save a little room on your signs. You can certainly include the cent space if you have some things that are half cents or not. But I would include the cents just to kind of clarify that you're talking about a dollar just without having the $sign. When you're making your sign, you want to make sure it's neat and concise, consistent. You want to certainly check your grammar and spelling. I hope a few of you have caught on by now that this hot shot roach and ant killer is not necessarily talking about the six-legged bugs that are crawling around, and perhaps talking about your parents' siblings. So certainly want to check your grammar and spelling, and make sure that we're not out there trying to kill some ants, the wrong type of ants. So make sure your grammar and spelling is correct, and otherwise somebody will notice. You want to make sure that your messaging is consistent. Kind of get a little kick out of this one. It says, "Come on in, we're awesome." Perhaps maybe one, you don't need to tell people you're awesome. They should be able to figure that out. But two is, after you tell them you're awesome, don't then tell them no change for meters and there's no public restrooms. You sound kind of uninviting, maybe not necessarily awesome. So be consistent in your signage. Try to make sure that your actions are a good representation of what you're trying to portray. You want to make sure that you can sell the sizzle when you're trying to market these products. So Jonathan's apples, moderately tart. They're good for apple pies, salads, cooking, and eating. And they've got the price listed there and a nice picture of what the apples are, a picture of the apples. It's a great way to tell people what they should be doing with your product in case they don't know. You might give them ideas and ways to use a product that they hadn't thought about, which ultimately may lead them to be buying your product. If you're selling meats or other things that are kind of maybe not necessarily as close to kind of what the typical produce, then maybe you want to include recipes or something like that. Maybe you have a great lamb chop recipe, or a rack of rib recipe to how you can barbecue it on the grill, and you want to provide a good recipe for that, or show a picture of it cooked. That would go a long way to encouraging people to want to look at your product even further. If you're going to be selling flowers, then you certainly, if they're not in bloom, you would want to make sure you have a picture of them in bloom so that somebody can see that and know what they're looking at buying, and provide some additional information as well. So this is a great example of that. If you use some kind of buzzwords, limited time only, this is the first crop, this is the peak of our season, it's our best seller, this is our farmer favorite, this is our pick of the week, signature item, things like that really can draw attention to certain products that you're trying to move. You can be funny, certainly with your signs. The carrots, it says, "We're ugly, but we're sweet." Some of us may feel that way, but it's a good way to sell your product and get rid of some maybe product that doesn't look quite as nice as some other, but it certainly still is not diminished in quality. Here's another little funny one. Fresh milk inside. No wonder the cornflake truck has been stalking us, right? So it can be humorous. It's funny. Make sure that it's kind of a pretty easy to get joke. Otherwise, you may lose some people. But all in all, I think jokes are good, lighthearted. Advertising is nice. If you have an artistic ability, I certainly don't, then I would encourage you to maybe do some artistic signs, make them look pretty. It shows that you have put a lot of time and a lot of effort into not only your display, but it kind of it would make a consumer believe that if you put this much time into your display and your signage, that you probably spend even more time on the quality of your product. So they can feel assured that they're buying a good quality product by the look of your display and the cleanliness of it. If you're using pictures, you want to include some white space to kind of keep from the background from kind of overshadowing. So this is just a good example of using pictures if you have them, and then listing out different ways to sell. I mentioned before being consistent, so you want to make sure you're consistent with your marketing messages. This is a good example of Fisher's Adventure Farm Park. From the Alpine Adventure and the colors that they use to border all of their images, they use very similar coloring, all the way through to their farm logo, to the trash receptacle where they have their farm logo with the same color scheme. So that's a great way to be very consistent with their marketing, even all the way through to the trash receptacle. This is a good example of, this is maybe something that your market manager or market as a whole could get involved with. But that would be having some sort of sign for kids to get behind and have their pictures made, or have their pictures made in front of it. Certainly a great way to draw kind of attention to the market itself, which ultimately would draw additional customers through to your stand. If you have a way to educate and inform your customers, whether it's done on a nice sign like this, or maybe it's just your general knowledge of the products that you're selling, certainly be open to providing that information. People come to farmers markets for more than just buying produce. They want an experience. There's a reason that they go to a market instead of just going and buying from the local Kroger or Food City or Walmart. Right. So if you can include information about how apples grow, or the importance of, in your beliefs, of organic, of why you why you want to grow for organic, you can include some of that information to try and encourage people to buy with you. But we'll be willing to educate people and have a conversation, because you're going to give them a really positive experience and provide them a lot of information they're not going to forget, and they're going to likely come back to you time after time with looking for either more information or just because they remember you. So it's certainly something to consider as well. Here's a very nice sign displayed talking of the life of a potato. So talking about the seasons that the potato goes through, and how different potatoes are grown, and maybe different ways to use them. So this is certainly a very good sign to provide a lot of information. I mentioned earlier, and I'm a very big proponent of telling your story. There has to be something that's unique about your farm, something that, or your operation that you can sell, right? People don't necessarily look for a story when they go buy in bulk from Sam's Club or from Walmart or Kroger. But if they're coming to meet the producer, to meet the farmer that grew the produce or raised the animals for the product that they're buying, they're willing to pay a premium for that product, because they're getting more than just the product, right? So they want to know your story. They want to learn about you. They want to learn more and more, whether it's education, information, or just a lighthearted story about how you got into farming, how you've kept your family's farm in operation for numerous generations, whatever it may be. I believe everyone has a story, and if you can find a way to tell that in a good, positive way, that will only benefit you. You want to make sure if you're connected on social media, find ways to get connected with your customers. If you support certain causes, be vocal about it. Be proud. Make sure that you can display that information. So if you support the United Way or the local Boy Scouts or something like that, make it known, right? So, and you may find customers come through that also have a very strong calling to the same philanthropic organizations as you do. So they're going to want to work with you, and they may want to talk to you and purchase from you because of that. So certainly something to do as well. Some additional resources. So a lot of information that was presented today can also be found in the following two publications: the Merchandising Considerations for Direct Farm Marketers, Making the Most of the Market, as well as Creating Signage That Sells. These are both publications that you can find on our center's website, UTK Center for Profitable Agriculture. If you Google UTK CPA, we should be the first thing that pops up, and you can certainly take a look at our website and our resources there. There's a lot more than just these, but these are good ones to start out from. And this is some references of some publications and my contact information. If you have any further questions, please do not hesitate to call. This is our office number, and then my email address to reach me anytime. Please certainly feel free to reach out with any questions, comments, feedback. And I believe Hal, previous slide with articles. Is this one the one you're looking for, John? Okay, great. No problem. So these will be available and my contact information. I believe Hal has has posted in the chat box for a session evaluation. If you all could complete it, it's tiny.utk.edu/vendor webinar. If you all could take a moment when this is over with to complete that. I guess the last thing would be if anyone has any additional questions, I will be around for a little while. I'll be hanging out on this call, so please continue to ask questions in the chat. We would be happy to answer your questions, any that you have. But other than that, thank you, and I'll turn it back over to Hal.
Thanks, Jared. Really appreciate your sharing this important information with us. Some great recommendations to help vendors increase sales. If you joined us late, please enter your name in the chat box so we have a record of your attendance. And we hope everyone will join us tomorrow when we learn about digital marketing trends. And again, we appreciate all of you being with us and appreciate your completing the webinar evaluation for us. I'm going to stop the recording now, and we'll hang around, as Jared said, if you have any questions.